When a large white butterfly settled on the missionary's wife's palatial bosom, she felt flattered and allowed it to remain there. Her garden was beginning to burst into flower, giving her great pleasure. Her husband gave her none, and such fellow feeling as to make her tread gingerly among the caterpillars. Mr. John Harrison, the boy's guardian, felt only contempt for the good lady's buoyancy of spirit, but nevertheless gave her an ingratiating smile. "I hope you'll put the boy to work while I'm away," he said. "Make some use of him. He dreams too much. Most unfortunate that he's finished with school. I don't know what to do with him." "He doesn't know what to do with himself," said the missionary's wife. "But I'll keep him occupied. He can do some weeding or read to me in the afternoon. I'll keep an eye on him." "Good," said the guardian, and having cleared his conscience, he made quick his escape. Over lunch he told the boy, "I'm going to Delhi tomorrow. Business." It was the only thing he said during the meal. When he had finished eating, he lighted a cigarette and erected a curtain of smoke between himself and the boy. He was a heavy smoker. His fingers were stained a deep yellow. "How long will you be gone, sir?" asked Rusty, trying to sound casual. Mr. Harrison did not reply. He seldom answered the boy's questions, and his own were stated, not asked. He probed and suggested, sharply, quickly, without ever encouraging loose conversation. He never talked about himself. He never argued. He would tolerate no argument. He was a tall man, neat in appearance, and, though over 40, looked younger because he kept his hair short, shaving above the ears. He had a small ginger toothbrush mustache. Rusty was afraid of his guardian. Mr. Harrison, who was really a cousin of the boy's father, had done a lot for Rusty, and that was why the boy was afraid of him. His parents had died. Rusty had been kept, fed, and paid for, and sent to an expensive school in the hills that was run on exclusively European lines. He had, in a way, been bought by Mr. Harrison, and now he was owned by him, and he must do as his guardian wished. Rusty was ready to do as his guardian wished. He had always obeyed him. But he was afraid of the man, afraid of his silence, and of the ginger moustache and of the supple Malacca cane that lay in the glass cupboard in the drawing room. Lunch over, the boy left his guardian giving the cook orders and went to his room. The window looked out on the garden path, and a sweeper boy moved up and down the path, a bucket clanging against his naked thighs. He wore only a loincloth. His body was bare and burnt a deep brown, and his head was shaved clean. He went to and from the water tank, and every time he returned to it, he bathed, so that his body continually glistened with moisture. Apart from Rusty, the only boy in the European community of Dehra was this sweeper boy, the low-class, untouchable, the cleaner of pots. But the two seldom spoke to each other. One was a servant and the other a sahib. And anyway, muttered Rusty to himself, playing with the sweeper boy would be unhygienic. The missionary's wife had said, "Even if you were an Indian, my child, you would not be allowed to play with the sweeper boy," so that Rusty often wondered, with whom then would the sweeper boy play? The untouchable passed by the window and smiled, but Rusty looked away. Over the tops of the cherry trees were mountains. Dehra lay in a valley in the foothills, and the small, diminishing European community had its abode on the outskirts of the town. Mr. John Harrison's house and the other houses were all built in an English style, with neat front gardens and nameplates on the gates. The surroundings on the whole were so English that the people often found it difficult to believe that they did live at the foot of the Himalayas, surrounded by India's thickest jungles. India started a mile away, where the bazaar began. To Rusty, the bazaar sounded a fascinating place, and what he had seen of it from the window of his guardian's car had been enough to make his heart pound excitedly and his imagination soar. But it was a forbidden place, full of thieves and germs, said the missionary's wife, and the boy never entered it save in his dreams. For Mr. Harrison, the missionaries, and their neighbors, this country district of blossoming cherry trees was India. They knew there was a bazaar and a real India was not far away, but they did not speak of such places. They chose not to think about them. The community consisted mostly of elderly people. The others had left soon after independence. These few stayed because they were too old to start life again in another country, where there would be no servants and very little sunlight. And though they complained of their lot and criticized the government, they knew their money could buy them their comforts, servants, good food, whiskey, almost anything, except the dignity they cherished most. But the boy's guardian, though he enjoyed the same comforts, remained in the country for different reasons. He did not care who were the rulers so long as they didn't take away his business. He had shares in a number of small tea estates and owned some land, forested land, where, for instance, he hunted deer and wild pig. Rusty, being the only young person in the community, was the center of everyone's attention, particularly the ladies. He was also very lonely. Every day he walked aimlessly along the road, over the hillside, brooding on the future, or dreaming of sudden and perfect companionship, romance and heroics, hardly ever conscious of the present. When an opportunity for friendship did present itself, as it had the previous day, he shied away, preferring his own company. His idle hours were crowded with memories, snatches of childhood. He could not remember what his parents were like, but in his mind there were pictures of sandy beaches covered with seashells of every description. They had lived on the west coast. In the Gulf of Kutch, there had been a gramophone that played records of grassy fields and Harry Lauder, and a captain of a cargo ship who gave the child bars of chocolates and piles of comics, the Dandy, Beano, Tiger Tim, and spoke of the wonderful countries he had visited. But the boy's guardian seldom spoke of Rusty's childhood or his parents, and this secrecy lent mystery to the vague, undefined memories that hovered in the boy's mind like hesitant ghosts. Rusty spent much of his time studying himself in the dressing table mirror. He was able to ignore his pimples and see a grown man, worldly and attractive. Though only 16, he felt much older. He was white, his guardian was pink, and the missionary's wife a bright red, but Rusty was white. With his thick lower lip and prominent cheekbones, he looked slightly Mongolian, especially in a half-light. He often wondered why no one else in the community had the same features. Mr. John Harrison was going to Delhi. Rusty intended making the most of his guardian's absence. He would squeeze all the freedom he could out of the next few days. explore, get lost, wander afar, even if it were only to find new places to dream in. So he threw himself on the bed and visualized the morrow. Where should he go? Into the hills again? Into the forest? Or should he listen to the devil in his heart and go into the bazaar? Tomorrow he would know. Tomorrow.